So, Tommy, very excited to be working with you next week. I've heard a lot about you from Anne and from players in the orchestra and everything. So I'm very excited to have you with us. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the two pieces, and in particular, um, maybe focus a little bit on Jesse's piece because that's probably the less familiar for the audiences of the two pieces. But I mean, Haydn C. Also, usually you hear Haydn D, and so maybe it's interesting to sort of just talk a little bit about how these two pieces are the pairing that we're having next week.
Yeah. First of all, super excited to be back in Philadelphia and in this beautiful space. And it's my first time playing with Chamber Orchestra Philly. And congrats to you, David, on the position. It's
Thank you.
just it's a wonderful thing and a great ensemble. And I'm looking forward to this concert in particular. And the pairing is exciting. Haydn. C major concerto, which is a definitely a very beloved piece, and Jesse Montgomery's Divided, which is a piece I commissioned a few years ago, and it's just this sort of battle between the orchestra and the soloist, which is quite the opposite of the Haydn. The
Yeah,
Haydn is sort of this very interesting, sort of introspective, can be extroverted conversation, but either way, it's a very civil conversation.
yeah,
And the Montgomery is not. It's sort of this argument and it turns violent at times. And so the conversation is very different with the two pieces within the two groups, the soloist and the orchestra. So I'm looking forward to that sort of contrast and putting that on display in the most extreme way. I mean, I love the Haydn so much. I mean, everyone loves that piece so much, and um, I love messing around with the cadenzas to make it feel like everything is coming together. In the Montgomery, there's a cadenza at the end, and of course, in the Haydn, there's cadenzas. So both pieces have cadenzas, and I quote either piece in the other piece.
oh,
So
great.
just to make things kind of come full circle,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
kind of an interesting way to because sometimes I pair the Montgomery with Saint-Saëns Concerto and whatever I'm pairing it with, I usually try to make things sort of relate to each other. So I'm looking forward to just that, and of course the sound of this space is one of the best. So yeah, and looking forward to us working together again,
yeah.
working together for the first time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm very excited by it as well, and I'm interested. How did you get to know Jessie and her work in terms of commissioning it? I didn't know it was you who commissioned it.
Yeah. This was a piece that it was 3 years ago. I mean, we Jesse and I have been friends for a long time, and we met through Sphinx organization, and my work with them has been really wonderful over the last several years, and I've just been it's such an honor for me to be involved with them in so many ways. I won their competition in 2016, and then went on to play in Sphinx Virtuosi, who
Great.
have played in this hall several times, and so I know this hall very well. And this piece Divided was just sort of a brainchild of the pandemic, and just we're sitting around not doing much. And I just told Jesse I want to have something that is really an outlet for the violence that was happening in social and political settings. And
Mhm.
so uh, that the whole George Floyd thing was happening at that time, and the social issues were just I mean, it was seething in everyday news, and everyone didn't know how to feel about any of it, and it was very, very intense for a lot of people. And so Jesse just unleashed this in this sort of argument, and honestly, this message has persisted to this day, which is that no matter what it is, you're on both sides of the aisle. Uh, no one can really agree on anything. Doesn't matter what topic. It's like if you're on one side or the other side, you can never. No one's listening to each other, and no one's coming to solutions. And that's this feeling that this piece creates, which is we're we're arguing in this pointless way that no one's actually listening to each other. And so that's what this argument is about in Divided, is just it's violent, it's intense, and uh, everything is just not quite on the same page. So if you have a motive, da di da di da di, the cello follows or the orchestra follows, but it's never at the same time. So it's like it's always off center all the time. So that sort of reflects that thing where we're never on the same page.
It's funny. I'm just thinking. There's the symphony that I paired with it, um, uh, Haydn 64. It has a Latin little catchphrase to it. It's sort of like it's like a nickname to the symphony. And it really it's funny because Haydn's symphonies always got their nicknames from other people and everything. And people just added, okay, you get the surprise symphony because somebody was like, oh, it's a surprise. And you get the miracle symphony because a chandelier dropped down at one of the performances, no one on top of people, no one was killed. Oh, it's a miracle. So sometimes the nicknames are just kind of like, I don't know how that got there, but this particular one, it came from from Haydn himself. He was scribbling on the top of the page, um, and in the parts, not in the score.
Okay.
And the phrase was a kind of a Latin phrase that was a sort of a common phrase, but the translation of the phrase is, the times change and we change with them.
Mm.
Which I thought was kind of like just kind of a fun, cheeky sort of, it's like, well, it's my first season, so it's like, yeah, the times change. And of course, we look around the entire world, and boy, the times continue to change, and nobody knows what's going on. But there's another interesting thing about the symphony that actually ties into what you just said, because in the second movement, and it's a little bit, and this will go towards what you were just talking about. In the second movement, there's all sorts of things that happen where cadences are avoided. Things don't happen the way you expect them to. I mean, in some ways, it's very typical Haydn, but there's also this kind of thing where he's playing around with delayed things. This is not in the right place. This order is not correct. This is the wrong. And there's this idea about that rather than thinking of the title of is the times change and we change with them, that the second movement, there's a musicologist who has this idea that time is disjointed, and that things aren't lining up the way they should in normal time. And so that the idea of the symphony, particularly in the second movement, but that things are not normal. Things are not the way they're supposed to be. And as a result, you get this strange sense that time is slightly disjointed. We're not getting the things that we expect. And in a little bit, it's kind of, that's the reason I was chuckling. It reminds me of what you were just talking about.
Absolutely.
Where we're not quite on the same.
That's so interesting. Yeah, no, that's, and I hope you talk about that at the concert.
I will, yeah.
That's so great. That's so great.
It's a really, it's a really interesting thing because he, in this is a symphony comes from right at the end of the Sturm und Drang period, so it's not the earlier ones that most of us know, the Trauer Symphony 44 and some of these other ones.
Yeah.
So this one comes kind of towards the end of that period, but the clue is that he was writing around that same time. He was writing a bunch of incidental music for plays. Because sitting in the Hungarian countryside, Prince Esterhazy says, "Oh, I there's a play coming in. I need incidental music for a play. Write me something." And so there's a bunch of symphonies that are kind of related. They're sort of called the theater symphonies, which are originally coming out of these incidental music for plays. And the second movement is suspected to have been actually from a play about Hamlet, like some kind of strange version of Hamlet. And this whole idea of time being disjointed comes from a quote from Hamlet that time is disjointed and everything. So
Okay.
it's this kind of very, very interesting, I always love, Haydn in particular because the, the quirkiness of it, the loves playing with expectations. We never quite expect the things to happen that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Asymmetrical phrasings, things. It's not nice, neat little, So but I like the idea that this is, that not only are you trying to make a connection between the two concertos in terms of motivics, maybe some crossing and the things like that, but that by somehow serendipity, there's other elements of the concert that are kind of sort
Yeah.
of feeding into that. Um, I Jesse's piece, I'm sure you've played many, many times. Um, do you, from the standpoint of the Haydn, do you play C more than D? I'm just kind of curious. Or you kind of
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I love the C major, Not to say that I don't love the D, but it's definitely the D major concerto is a little bit eccentric at times, and I love it, but
yeah,
I have to say I'm a little partial to C major just because I find that last movement so exciting. Like I find that it's just so exciting, and it's so beautiful, that second movement. I mean,
yeah.
yeah. So it's got everything. But yeah, I love that this unifying concept of this concert is going to really come to the fore. It's sort of really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's, I'm not a I'm not a person who likes just kind of like disjointed, like, oh, there's this piece and there's this piece and there's this piece and there's this piece.
Yeah.
It's always this question of, well, why should these pieces go together? Why,
Yeah.
you can pick anything you want. So why these pieces?
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes audiences, even if they don't, if it's done well, I think in terms of crafting programs and things like that, if it's done well, I think even if the through line or the thread is something that is not necessarily obvious to the
Yeah.
audience, they kind of sense it
Mhm.
in some way that there's a through line.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
What what have you been doing lately? I see on your Instagram you've been running around, that this has been a very busy month. Oh,
Yeah.
well, actually
Yeah.
January too. I mean, you're kind of all over the place. I've seen, and you with Michelle. We had Michelle also as our opening
That's
soloist.
great.
You did a
Yeah.
recital with Michelle Can recently.
Yeah, we did I think we did three recitals together. I did a couple recitals with Yoon Lee, and then I've got a couple recitals with JP Joffrey. I did one with a friend of mine named Greg Zellick, who is an organist. And it's just been all over essentially. And I had a little bit of a break in December, the second half of December, and just really shot out of a cannon starting like January 9th. No, actually the 3rd. It was the 3rd. So I also played a couple recitals with my friend Ilya Yakushev. So I've got these four collaborators, including Michelle, who you guys played with.
Yeah,
She's just so great, and
yeah,
she
we loved
told
her.
me all about you guys and how much she enjoyed it, and so we're so glad to be collaborators, and we've got these projects coming up as well, and more commissions together, and just really committing to the rep with cello piano, and playing it as many places as we can. So yeah, we've got a lot of plans coming up, and we're now colleagues at Manhattan School of Music, and that's really nice,
Oh
to be
yes,
able to.
I saw that appointment. I'm in Manus, so
Oh, that's great.
like down the road, down the
Are
road
you are
from
you in New York City?
yeah.
Oh, okay, great. Have you lived here a long time?
Well, the crazy thing is, I lived in Philadelphia for almost 30 years. When I finished Curtis, I got a job. It was one of these things. It was like that particular year was not a great year for assistant conductor positions somewhere,
Oh,
along
no.
the world. And I happened to know that the Opera Company of Philadelphia, then now Opera Philadelphia, was looking for an assistant conductor, and Michael Korn, who was the chorus master and associate conductor, also had the Philadelphia Singers, which was a professional chorus, and he was looking for an assistant for both.
Okay.
So I auditioned for and got that job,
That-
and
That's great.
started working for them. And then after a couple of years, Michael passed away, and I was acting director of Philadelphia Singers, and then subsequently music director. And I was music director there for 23 years.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So, so I had this long period of time, and we were the resident chorus of the orchestra, and I was on staff at the Philly Orchestra and at Curtis, and at sometime around when I was finishing up with Philadelphia Singers in 2015, I had I had another ensemble that I was working with here up in New York, in addition to having been teaching at Manus for a decade plus. And I had been going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Amtrak and I got to be very good friends.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
We got to be very good friends. And so I kind of had, I've been up in New York all the time, and I wanted to, at that point, I was sort of like, well, I've kind of sort of got a little bit more going on in New York than I did. And I said, I could still go back to Philadelphia. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
just the other way.
Yeah.
And so ended up, I was like, well, maybe I should try the New York thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've lived here for 10 years now.
Okay. I'm the same, actually. I've been here 10 years.
Yeah, no, it's it's a different feeling, but I mean, I have a very fond sort of feeling about Philadelphia. Whenever I go back to Philadelphia, it's always this I liken it, and I don't mean this in a dismissive way or in any way, shape, or form. It's just like, but I liken it to, like, putting on like an old sweatshirt that is the most comfortable thing that you could possibly wear, and it's just like, this is very comfortable and very, it just sort of makes you feel like, yeah, I kind of feel like I'm home. And
Yeah, that's home. That's home. Yeah. No, there is that feeling. And I mean, I didn't spend tons of time in Philly. I mean, over the last several years, I'm in and out because I was an astral artist,
Oh
and
yeah,
I
okay,
go
great.
in and out of
Yeah,
their office just to do meetings and play concerts in the local Philadelphia area as well. And so I did get to know the city, a good amount, but it does feel homey in a way. Like there's a quaintness to the narrow streets, and I've got my coffee shop. We were just talking earlier about Park, that restaurant.
yeah,
Not
exactly.
an endorsement, but definitely there's incredible restaurants there. I mean, it's kind of endless, but there's a few that I go to every time, and I do love Philadelphia. New York is overwhelming. You feel like you can't put your finger on it,
Yeah,
and it's great because of that. But Philly is a little bit more manageable, and yeah, it does feel more comfortable, and you're still in that metropolitan feel.
yeah, and that's, that always, to me, always made it kind of nice. It was like, yeah, I mean, and it's more human scale,
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
sense of, I mean, yes, there's some tall buildings and everything like that, but it's not like Manhattan.
no, yeah,
I mean, it still feels very walkable, very human scale, and I'm, it's probably because the colonial part of the city is still there.
that's right.
It's
Yeah, yeah,
most of it is still
preserved.
there and
Yes,
preserved,
yes,
whereas
that
in
is
New
such a
York,
phenomenal thing.
it just bulldozed almost everything.
Yep,
If it's
yep. No,
more than
I love
more than
that.
50 years old, it's,
That's right. No,
let's get
I
rid of it.
love Old City, and I love reading all the plaques. That whole right, isn't that Old City? Where is that
Yeah,
area? And
Old
then
City,
south of there, what is that? Society Hill or something?
Society Hill. Yeah,
Yeah, I love seeing those like plaques, like, oh, like the dentist, like named John blah 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 was here in 1785.
yeah. No, it's really, and I've always loved the that sense of, that kind of palpable sense of history in Philadelphia. That
Yeah,
it's just, it's like you can touch it.
yeah,
Where in lots of other, which is actually in some ways it's kind of very European, like in that sense, because like you can touch the history in
that's
European
right.
cities
Yeah,
and things. Um, New York, you have to look for it a little bit more.
that's right. Yeah,
Here,
and actually there is an app that I downloaded to you can actually it's a map of all Manhattan, and there's little dots all over it, and you can press the dots, and it shows you a photo of that particular street corner from, like, a century ago.
I have that app.
You do have it. Oh, okay.
That app.
Great. I'm glad. So it's
It's
called Urban Archive, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
it's such a great thing.
it's no, it is great because, like, you can sort of stand on the same street corner and go click, and you're like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's such an interesting thing to have because like you said, they've demolished a lot of this stuff, and so it's nice to be able to see it.
Yeah. So what are your I mean, I know you've got some commissions and other stuff coming up. I mean, what are your next concerts?
Yeah, coming up, I've got this guy JP Joffrey, who's a phenomenal bandonian player. We're doing a couple concerts in on the West Coast, and then yeah, I mean, I'm doing a concerto by Jocelyn Morlock in Canada.
Oh, really?
Yep, yep. You know this composer?
Yeah, and she just died very
She did.
tragically, like
Yeah,
last year or the year before, and everything like that. So
yeah.
somebody on our composition faculty, David T. Little's on our composition faculty,
Oh,
and David, he's a chair actually, and
okay.
he sent me. He said, I just found out about this composer from Canada, and it was really interesting. Do you know this person? And sent me this
Mm.
link of some stuff, and I was listening to it, going like, wow, this is
Yeah.
really good stuff.
It's great music. Great music. Yeah, and I've heard a lot of her stuff just for cello.
Hmm.
There's a piece for cello and orchestra called Lucid Dreams that I'm playing. It's like a massive 45-minute
Oh,
work that I'm playing with
wow.
Montgomery Symphony, and uh, that's right across Windsor's right across the street from Detroit, right
Right.
across the
Yeah,
river.
that's the bridge that goes to.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is tragic. I mean, her music is just so gorgeous, and I wish I would have met her. But, I was pointed in her direction by an old friend of mine, and it's stunning. Absolutely stunning music. And the concerto is going to be a big adventure. So that's going to be in March. And then other recitals sprinkled around that as well. But yeah, her music is really, really great. So I'm
There's a
looking forward
there's a
to.
piece, if you don't know it, it's worth checking out. She wrote a piece. Um, I'm forgetting the name of the person, but it exists in a couple of versions: a big orchestra version and then a chamber orchestra version.
Are you
Actually,
talking about Amanda Todd?
Yes.
Yes.
Have you
Yeah,
heard
yeah.
that?
I did hear a little bit of that. Phenomenal. Yeah.
I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, in
Yeah.
fact, that was the piece that David Little was like suggesting. He said because he thought, I mean, for those of us, those of listening to the podcast, the work Jocelyn wrote this work in honor of a, a young woman who was, as a teenager, was bullied,
Yeah,
and online bullied,
that's right.
and ultimately committed suicide
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
result of it. And so to kind of like honor that and to make a powerful statement about, we have to watch out for this kind of thing. You have to be
Yeah.
aware of this kind of thing. But David thought that many of the students actually might resonate with many of them, and that it would be a good piece for us to play. I haven't done it yet, but it's a piece that's kind of on my list. I really would like to do it.
Yeah. It will it seems like it would resonate. And I was sent a recording of Lucid Dreams. And what was said to me was essentially, you know, that Jocelyn really struggled with these things on her own, and she related to them so strongly.
Uh,
And so I'm not sure about the bullying, but definitely it seems like this idea that reality and your kind of hallucinations are becoming one essentially in this piece. And so exploring that concept, I think, is going to be very interesting. And just knowing that the composer was relating so strongly to their music on any level, for any composer in any piece, it's such a compelling concept, of course, because when we're living through our art, then we relate to it so much, and that others potentially discover that. So I imagine that piece would be very relatable.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I think that's, I mean, particularly, I mean, if you're talking about students in their late teens and early 20s, who have grown up online at this stage,
essentially, yeah,
at this
yeah,
point, essentially grown up online, that the idea encountering cyberbullying and that kind of thing is, I think it's something that sadly probably a few of them have had incidents where they've had to, where they've had to deal with that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And the thing that I love about the piece, what I really love about the piece, is that ultimately it's a very positive piece, and
Mm.
it sounds like it could be like, that could be really like a really depressing piece,
Oh
but it's not actually, because
yeah.
it turns into a very kind of sort of hopeful, that this doesn't have to be this way. You can change it, etc., like that. And that's why I love that about the piece, because it really becomes, something that out of such a tragedy, that positiveness can come, positivity and positive things can come
Mm.
out of
Yeah.
something that is really just a horrible tragedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really, I would love to. I'm gonna have to check that piece out. Lucid Dreams. I'm gonna have to check that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be my first time, and I
And where
don't
are you doing it?
with Windsor. This is going
Oh,
to
okay. Oh, yeah, Windsor. Okay, right. Yeah.
yeah, in March. And so I'm diving into it now, and just we'll see. I don't know what to expect. I loved her music. I browsed the score and I just said, you know what? I can't not play this piece. So I just I had my managers reach out to some people, and they got Windsor. So I'm hoping that this will, I'll continue to perform it if it ends up being something that's viable. But you never know. It's 45 minutes. It's a very significant work. We're talking about like Dvorak length. So
But it's half a program. I mean,
it's yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so we'll see. I'll let you know how it goes.
yeah, no, really, please do it. I mean, I'm definitely gonna have to check that out. I mean, one of the things that I love working with, um, I love working with contemporary composers, and people that are A, friends, or B, have become friends.
Mm,
Uh, I love being able to ask them about. I
yeah.
mean, sadly, Jocelyn has passed,
Yeah.
but in other cases, when you're working with a living composer, and it's just so exciting to have that exchange of questions and ideas and thinking. It was funny. I'm a close colleague, and we were classmates actually together with Jennifer Higdon.
Mm,
And Jennifer, I just did a piece of hers at Canton Symphony last month, and there was it's a piece that I had done before, but there were some questions that came up as I was re-looking at the score, and I was like, this doesn't seem quite good. And there was a question that came up in a rehearsal,
okay.
and one of the players asked a question about, like, should that note be this as opposed to that, because it breaks the pattern that is set
Yeah.
up. I thought, that's really interesting, and I thought, and then I said, I'll ask her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so
That's really kind.
I sent a quick email, and she's like, yes, okay, so that note.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. And it's nice when they're still with us, It's like I've got a lot of questions for Beethoven.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, is it's like, exactly, you have all of these questions. You're like, all I can do is make the best guess I possibly
That's
can
right.
as to what it is, where it's
That's
like,
right.
isn't
Also,
it?
I'd really like to ask Haydn if he wrote that concerto. That's what I really want to ask him.
Well, yeah, I mean, because there's some question about the authenticity,
Yeah,
the authorship of that concerto.
that's right. Yeah, it might have been Kraft. Might have been his pupil. But we don't know. We don't know.
Well, and there's all sorts of, I would love to have been a fly on the wall, or at least ask some questions about, like, Haydn giving Beethoven counterpoint lessons.
Yeah. Love to be in that room.
What was the vibe like in that room?
Yeah, yeah. Talk about very classy, and then kind of middle finger like in the room at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's kind of it's sort of like the, I know composition teachers and everything like that, when they deal with or they're trying to help mold a very precocious but very strong personality
Yeah, yeah,
compositionally, and it's like the question is, how do you do that?
yeah. How much do you rein them in? How much do you let them
Right?
go?
How much
Yeah,
you let them go? What do you say? What do you not say?
yeah, No, the classic teacher-student dynamic, you know?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's fascinating that Haydn and Beethoven had that relationship, which is, um, I often wonder, um, particularly in that period, like it would have been so cool to just because it was such a small town. Actually, it would have been so cool to like right around 1790 to about 1805, hang around Vienna
Oh yeah. Can you
in
imagine?
that period, just like, because Schubert's floating around,
That's right.
Mozart's
Yeah.
there until 1791,
Yeah.
Haydn's there, Beethoven's there. There's all of these people just kind of hanging around,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
No, that is pretty cool. I mean, it's hard to know. Also, as history goes on, they weren't aware of that. What have we witnessed, or what have I witnessed as
Yeah.
far as these kinds of situations? Living in New York City, it's easy to sort of feel like, okay, we're all just like living and just breathing and all these things, just surviving, and then 30 years from now, we're like, oh wow, we were like in the mix, of really interesting and groundbreaking things. And
Well, and you also realize the other thing that I realize so much is that it it is, even though it feels like it's this big, huge place,
yeah,
it's a really
it's
small
yeah,
community.
yep,
And
very true.
the artistic community is shockingly small
Yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of, the people. I'm just constantly aware of, interconnections. Like, oh, wait a minute, from, oh,
yeah,
from, and then I mean, Jessie is a good example of this. I think I met her once, but I met her because she was one of the violinists of Public Quartet.
that's right. Yeah,
And Janina Norpoth, who's the first violinist of Public Quartet, and sort of involved with, because most of them, Jesse was the one. I think the three other players were all Manus people.
yeah, that's right.
Um, and and I think Jesse was the one that was not Manus. I'm not sure where she was, Juilliard or MSM or something like that.
Yeah,
But they got together as that quartet, and then her first couple of things that she started doing, Banner was like one of the
yeah,
first things,
yeah,
but she wrote it for them
that's
and
right.
then turned it into this kind of bigger piece.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I think I met her once because we invited Public Quartet to come and do something, and Jessie wasn't playing then, but she was composing,
oh, okay.
and we ended up having her come and talking about Banner because the Public Quartet was coming in to do a bunch of stuff. Um, but it's really fascinating because, then subsequently, Jesse started doing really, really, really big things.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it all started out as like these people in a quartet, and
yeah. Yeah, you never know what's going to happen. And Caroline Shaw is also an example of that. And
yeah, yeah.
just people are just experimenting. Of course, we have Gabriela Ortiz, who just, really just is exploding now. And it's just really nice to have all these different voices who you just never know who's gonna kind of be up next. And it's nice to be a part of that. Curtis Stewart also,
Oh, Curtis, yeah, yeah.
and Michael Abels as well. I mean, these guys are they're all so great, and it's exciting to feel like we can have our fingers in some of these things. Like with Michael, I'm asking him to write me a concerto. And that'll be for the 26-27 season. Curtis as well. We're gonna probably do something, and just a lot of I love new music. I mean, I feel like just playing. I mean, I love Haydn. We love Dvorak. We love all these
Of
things,
course, yeah.
and it's become my profession and my expertise. But I don't I can't go to sleep at night thinking that's what I'm going to do for like thinking that's what I'm going to do for years and years and years. I love doing that, but I can't only do that. And I just love that this program embodies that feeling of I do love Haydn, but I love communicating other things too, like with the Jesse piece. And the world is too big and progressing too fast to only feel like we have both feet in the past. And so I just want to hear from friends. I want to hear from people who are living in the world that I'm living in, that we're living in, and experiencing the same things we are.